The topic for this session is Africa in power. Africa was actually in power about 5,105 years ago. At that time, Africa ruled the world. Everybody looked for Africa. Everybody all over the world tried to get into Africa, tried to get permission to move into Africa. Africa was actually the Garden of Eden. Africa was so great. There was no country, no continent like Africa. At that time, Africa reigned supreme, and people were begging to enter Africa. For instance, the Jews, Israel, was brought up in Egypt, in Africa. At that time, the blacks ruled, the blacks owned the world. But the blacks were dealing with 10%, sorry, 10 to 99.9% of the brain. That is the human heart aspect of human life, which in ancient Egypt or in ancient Africa referred to as math. So when Africa was in power, Africa reigned. Even the Greeks went there. All these Greek names, all these Greeks, all the powerful Greeks studied in Africa. They all went there. Even Plato. Plato spent over 21 years in Egypt. And all this, everybody wanted to get into Africa. And the Jews were, were very eager to get into Africa. And they succeeded when Joseph was in power, when Joseph, their brother, whom they sold into slavery, and went and lied to their father that Joseph had been eaten by an animal or something. Their father wept and wept and wept. But eventually, when they were having problems, they moved to the gate in ancient Egypt, and they were brought face to face with their brother Joseph, who had grown, and Joseph was very troubled. He recognized them because he was a small boy when they sold him, and he entered into Egypt. And Egypt was a great nation. Everybody who entered into Egypt changed, and Israel, Joseph's entry into Egypt changed him and made him big, huge, powerful, more powerful than their brothers. Sorry, more powerful than his brothers, because the brothers were the people who came looking for food. That time my father was aged. So Joseph recognized them, and then eventually he planned and asked the Pharaoh to let his brothers come into Egypt. And of course, they were envious of Egypt. They admired Egypt. Egypt was so great, so powerful. And the Pharaoh never went to any other country. You can't hear the Pharaoh travel to any other country because you don't go to a smaller country. And all over the world, Egypt was great. In ancient Egypt, even Benin here was great. Benin and all those Canon Bono Empire. All these African nations were so great. African empire, they are so great. Ethiopia and all those places were so huge, so powerful. And the Europeans were always pressing to enter Africa by any means. So that was what happened. And Egypt reigned 5,105 years ago. Africa reigned supreme and was powerful, but Africa was gentle. Africa was righteous. Africa was powerful. We're not talking about bringing down anybody. We're not talking about destroying any country. But it's people that came into Africa, and Africa kept them for 400 and something years. The Jews were in Africa. They spent almost 400 years in Africa, or about 400 and something years in Africa. They stayed in Africa, developed, and became a great nation right inside Africa, where all the good things in the world, where the Africa people were hungry in their own homes, they were going to Africa. They lacked wisdom, they came to Africa. They lacked everything, they came to Africa. And Africa accommodated them till today. Africans accommodate and welcome visitors. They welcome other people. We are very African. We love people from outside. We admire people from outside. We cherish them. We love them. We welcome them. But other parts of the world hate Africans. So at the end of the day, when Africa's greatness was to come down, because it's normal. After 5,105 years, the civilization will come down. The great things about Africa came down. And when Africa came down, it was taken over by all these countries that were all looking up to Africa, that were all coming to Africa, stealing, doing everything, lying, doing everything in Africa. Africa helped every country. There's no part of the world that Africa didn't assist. Africa assisted everybody, raised everybody, made the world great because it was dealing with 99.9% of the brain. It was dealing with 10 to 99% of the brain, the human heart aspect of the human life on earth, the super universe of human life on earth. That's what Africa was dealing with. And that aspect of human life on earth is missing since 5,105 years ago. That aspect has been lost. And ancient Egypt that built the greatest of the wonders of the world. It is the only place where the greatest wonders of the world are still standing. And ancient Egypt is there, powerful, potent, and it's still there. It's still standing there. Ancient Egypt beat what was greatest all over the world. It's still standing there, and nobody knows what it means because people are not ready to go into the human heart aspect of human life on earth, which is what ancient Egypt knew. So Africa was dragged down. Africans were now, when they tried to penetrate Africa, they didn't know what Africa had. Because even when Plato, people like Plato entered into Africa at that time, he was taught an inferior thing. He was not given the great teaching that made Africa great. He was not given the great teaching of the Pharaoh. He was just a person who came. And that time, they were white. Whites were ordinary people. They were serving black. They were in ancient Egypt. They were serving black, coming to Africa as visitors, always rushing to Africa. Africa never went outside Africa. Africa was the greatest, the food basket of the world, and everybody was coming to Africa. Everybody they were trying to control them, but Africa allowed them. And ancient Egypt was a place where everybody was allowed, everything was made free. But those people brought Africa down. All those people, Africa was kept everywhere free, kept everywhere open, and they all came to Africa. And when they entered, they brought Africa down. And when they brought Africa down, they started looting all the things in Africa. But if you go to the other parts of the world now, you see that African things that they took from Africa, are in their museums. Britain, the Vatican, and all over the world. You see things that came from Africa, which they seized, which they started coming to Africa, killing Africans, enslaving them, doing everything and destroying Africa. They did that for thousands of years and brought Africa down. So today, they have replaced the human mind aspect of human life on earth with, for the human heart aspect of human life on earth. Actually, the human mind aspect of human life on earth is weak, is the lower section, which came from Europe, which they brought from Europe, and through colonialism and all sorts of strategies, they forced this thing down on Africans. And Africans right now are dealing with the human mind aspect of human life on earth only as the highest aspect. And it's a problem. Africa cannot cope. There's nothing in Africa. Africa is down now. Africa that used to be so great, greater than the whole world, now down because they have done everything to bring Africa down. And Africa is now suffering and suffering and suffering, all over because it doesn't know. Africans don't know that the human mind they are dealing with now, everything human mind is about religion and science, which is disintegration, which is separation. The human heart aspect, which is integration and unification, are now down, and people don't know it. It's now lost. The 10 to 99.9% aspect of the brain is lost right now as we are in Africa because all the books in the world are talking about the human mind, human mind, human mind. All the books, even the greatest books, are about the human mind, which is lower, and 1 to 9.9% of the brain, which is lower, not even up to 10% of the brain, which Egypt was dealing with. And even the super civilization of ancient Egypt, because what we have now is the civilization aspect of human life on earth. That is the human mind aspect. The civilization aspect of human life on earth is about religion and science. But the super civilization aspect, that's about the human heart aspect, the super universe above, and the aspect that the super being within, the super being inside of you, the super self, the super man, and the superhuman aspect. That is what I refer to as the human mind. Sorry, the human heart aspect. That is the super civilization aspect. That is the highest. That one is missing and lost. Nobody knows how to recover it. But happily, this aspect is not missing from Africa. It's still there. It's still reigning in Africa. That is the honesty aspect, the wisdom aspect, the civilization aspect, the perfection aspect, the thing about Africa that made Africa great, which is still there, which is still hidden. Nobody has been able to capture it. They have studied, looted Africa, dug and dug and dug all over the world, all the universities all over the world. They are digging in Africa, trying to find in ancient Egypt what is there, written thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of books about this thing. But they are wrong. They've not got it. Because the thing has to do with the human heart aspect, with the aspect of the brain higher than 10%. But they are dealing with the aspect of the brain 3 to 1%. And that's the point. So right now, Africans can do, all over the world, humanity can do human heart study, human heart realization, human heart mastery, and human heart management. That is the only thing that can liberate humanity from the evil, because everybody is now suffering it. People are now in conflict, war everywhere, fighting, killing people. That's what is going on now. All over the world is killing of human beings, destruction of human beings, empire, the powers that are there now, which are strong, are the powers that are that are, you cannot trust them. They are not honest. They are not truthful. They are just killing and destroying all those sorts of things, freakishly, openly, destruction. That's what we call superpower today. Like a superpower ought to be a power that is heavenly, a power that is gracious, a power that is supreme, that is extraordinary, that is wonderful, that is just that when you go into it, you see healing, you see liberation, you see deliverance, you see salvation, you see liberation, you see relief, euphoria, bliss, ecstasy. That's what greatness is. That's what nature and divinity mean. But today we are dealing with religion and science, which are about the human mind, and that is just really unfortunate. I thank you very much for listening.